Generally, YouTubers are seen as fun-loving entertainers with a passion for a specific niche in content. Many look up to these entertainers as inspirational role models. But what if I told you that even a fun-loving place like YouTube has a dark side? What if I told you that even the most family-friendly, light-hearted YouTubers potentially have a dark secret? Welcome to the dark side of YouTube. I am your host, Autumn Ivy, and with this series, my team and I will be taking the deepest dives into the darkest and most disturbing corners of YouTube. These are the stories YouTube doesn't want you to know about. From the creators of The Dark Side of Gaming and The Dark Swamp horror stories, you won't want to miss a single minute of the dark side of YouTube.
Almost 10 years ago, the city I lived in was hit by a really bad hurricane, and my neighbor was almost completely flooded. It was so bad the city council just didn't have enough people on hand to deal with it all, so they basically asked for volunteers to come forward to help deal with all the damage and misplaced people that lived in public housing. I was one of those volunteers, and my job was to assess homes for damage, make a list of them, and then pass the lists on to the relevant departments so they could organize repair teams to go out and fix the people's homes. One such home belonged to an older man who ran the local convenience store. The store made up the front section of the unit, while the rear parts contained their TV room, kitchen, bathroom, and bedroom. The tiled floor of the store part had survived pretty well, and they'd be able to claim on their insurance for all the stock they'd lost, but their actual living spaces were a different story. I made a list of all the ruined carpets, the electrical fittings that had been shorted, all kinds of things like that. We surveyed everything but this one room. Then when we got to it, we found it was locked. One of the maintenance guys said that he'd be able to just take the door handle off so we could get inside, and that it didn't matter if he damaged it because it was more than likely to just get replaced. So the guy goes out to his van, gets his toolbox, and comes back to dismantle the lock. Then when we open the door, we see a room that's almost completely lined with newspaper clippings. You could barely read anything below the waterline, as what wasn't lying on the floor, all mulched up, had become too shriveled and warped to read. But all the stuff we could read was seriously disturbing, and detailed all the various unsolved attacks on women that occurred in the city, going back to at least the late 80s. Some were from newspapers up and down the East Coast, too, and detailed attacks that had occurred in other cities, but that all had the same kind of MO about them. A girl is walking through the city late at night, and a guy comes up to ask her a question or something to get her to lower her guard. Then he attacks. Being the super cynical person that I am, I immediately think they're all trophies of attacks this guy has committed himself. So my first thought is to call the cops. I really did think that I'd uncovered evidence of some serial attacker who'd gone many years without being caught, and I was so interested to know if I was right that I insisted I get the number of one of the cops so I could get updates on how their investigation was going. About a week later, I give one of the cops a call to see how it's going and if they'd arrested the guy on the suspicion of anything. The cop told me that he too had believed that something really creepy was going on, but when they contacted the guy and asked him if they could have a little chat about the newspaper clippings, he'd been more than willing to talk to them about it. Turns out, one of the girls in the newspaper clippings was his sister, and that since the guy had never been caught, he'd been doing his own little investigation into the attacker and his identity. I felt bad enough knowing that I'd gotten completely the wrong idea about the guy, but what the cop told me next made me feel even worse. Not over anything I'd done or the inconvenience I caused the guy, more like pure sympathy for him, because years of his work had been almost completely destroyed. There'd been all these soaking wet folders in the desk drawers, all mulched up and rotten from the flooding. They weren't more creepy newspaper trophies as I initially suspected. They were years of this guy's own personal investigative notes, completely destroyed by the flood. I heard that there were interview notes, copies of crime scene photos the guy had Xeroxed, all kinds of stuff like that. It had taken him years to put it all together, and the flooding had destroyed it all in the space of a night. The cop said that the guy was visibly holding back tears when he'd given him the news about how much damage the flooding had done. He knew his carpets were going to be ruined, but he didn't expect the waters to reach the height of his desk drawer so that his files would be destroyed. He said he was so close to getting enough info together so that the cops would be able to catch the guy who attacked his sister. How the net was closing in closer and closer, that he was just months away from presenting his list of potential suspects to the cops in Philly and Newark. He could still remember a lot of the names, but the details linking their previous crimes to the unsolved ones had all gone up in smoke, or more accurately, had sunk down in the water. That whole incident is honestly one of the saddest of my life, knowing all that guy's hard work went down the pan. But it's also incredibly creepy to know that someone who'd committed enough attacks on women to fill an entire room with newspaper clipping might still be walking the streets. This is another story that happened on my rural country road about 6 months ago. I posted the first story that happened in high school as well, but thought both stories were too long to include in one post. I should have made the title, "Being a Good Samaritan Put Me and My 3-year-old Daughter in Danger." There was no almost to it. But anyway, I'm a single mom of a 3-year-old little girl. I'm so blessed that I have the most amazing parents who live about 20 minutes away from me who keep her when I need them to. I live in the city next to their rural area, and you have to go down a curvy wooded rural road to get to their house out in the country. My little girl had spent the night with them the night before, and I headed out to their house the next day around lunchtime to eat with them and bring her back to our house. It was a pretty day, sunny, a lot of bikers out though, so I was on high alert driving there, as anyone speeding and not paying attention could easily hit a biker, which is a big fear of mine. I got there fine, ate lunch with them, and was headed back to my house driving on the rural road, which I know like the back of my hand and typically speed on, knowing when to slow down and take certain curves. My little girl requested that I put on her favorite songs in the car, so I was kind of watching her sing as she sat in the car seat in the back of the car through my rearview mirror. As we drove back home, I caught a glimpse of something blue up ahead of me just on the edge of the woods near the road. I was going fast enough that the image didn't quite set in as I approached, then passed it. But right after passing it, my brain finally processed that it was a blue, older car. It was flipped upside down and was rammed into a tree. The road was empty with only one house near, and there weren't any ambulances or cars near, so at first I was like, what the hell? Truly, the wreck didn't look like it had just happened, but I knew something was wrong in my gut. I pulled my phone out and called 911 as I kept driving, not fully processing that this had just happened. "This is 911, what's your emergency?" "Hey, I'm driving down and I just noticed a blue car flipped upside down and it looks like they ran into a tree. There wasn't anyone visible near the car and no other cars around them. I'm not sure if I was the first person in the scene or what." "What's your exact location? Is there a house close to the wreck? Try to find the nearest address. I'm sending an ambulance out now. Was anyone visibly hurt or present at the scene?" "No, I didn't see anyone when I passed, but I'm not sure. I didn't get a super good look. I'm about 2 minutes down the road past the car now. Let me turn around and go back. I got my 3-year-old little girl in the car with me, just letting you know. I don't necessarily want her to see anything traumatizing, but I'll do what I need to do if I find anyone. The car looks super bad." "It's okay. Don't get out of the car, keep your doors locked. Just see if you can find the nearest address and I will stay on the phone with you the whole time." I turned around on the nearest driveway to me and drove back, speeding with my heart beating fast as I now realized someone clearly might be severely hurt, and I just passed them by not thinking I was the first to arrive on the scene. I was scared, but in action mode, ready to deal with what I was potentially about to see inside the vehicle. When I got to the house I thought was closest to the wreck, the conversation picked back up with the operator. "Okay, I think I'm almost to the car. I see a mailbox coming from the right here. Hang on. Okay, uh, this is the house a little less than a mile from the car. I'm headed for there, going towards... I see the car right here coming up to my left across from the sandpit looking area. It's a blue, older 4-door car. Okay, great. An ambulance was dispatched. It won't be long before they get there. Do you see anyone else or in or near the vehicle? Oh my god, wait, yes. I see a man around 25 to 30 standing in the middle of the road. I pull up next to the man with my doors locked, roll down my window with the phone still near my ear and 911 speaking to me. I immediately say, "Oh my god, are you okay? Is that your car?" The guy is slurring his words a little, clearly very injured but still standing and not in critical condition, and he just says, "Yeah, I'm fine." That's when I notice a large wound on the side of his head with blood all over it. I say, "Oh my god, you're bleeding. You aren't okay. I'm on the phone with 911 right now. They're sending an ambulance. Don't move." I hear the 911 operator ask me if he was okay or if he was hurt in my ear. I say no, he isn't. He's bleeding from the head, but he's standing in the road. I see the guy's face go from concerned about getting help to fully panicked and flat, and he says, "Is that 911 on the phone? Hang up. I need you to drive me up the road right now. Hang up the phone." The operator hears him say this and she says, "Is your daughter in the vehicle with you?" I say, "Yes. I can't drive this man anywhere. I'm not letting him in my car, especially with my little girl in here." Meanwhile, my daughter is silent in the back seat, just taking everything in. And that's when I look down and notice the man isn't wearing shoes. He's standing with bare feet, and there's a large wet stain on his blue jeans, which I immediately realize is urine. I can smell alcohol on him, and he isn't even standing that close to me. I work in the medical field and I deal with traumatic brain injury patients often, so I immediately wondered if maybe he had some kind of brain damage from the impact and began telling the operator, "Oh no, he isn't okay. I think he's hurt pretty bad." I look at the man staying as calm and matter-of-fact as I can, and I tell him, "I'm so sorry, but I can't drive you anywhere. My little girl's in the back seat. I don't feel comfortable doing that. And I didn't see anyone in the vehicle when I passed, so I already called 911. I think you need to let them come. I can't let you in my car. But I'll park over here and make sure you're okay until they get here, alright?" The man is visibly panicking, and now he seems livid. He starts yelling, "Tell them not to come." He's telling me to hang up the phone. My heart literally stopped beating. I began slowly and gently pressing the gas, rolling past him to indicate that I'm leaving. The 911 operator in my ear says, "Pretend to tell me not to come. Pretend to hang up with me, but keep on the line." So that's exactly what I do. "Hey, I think he's okay. He says he doesn't need any medical help. He says he lives really close, so actually just don't send the ambulances out. I'm really sorry for the miscommunication. Okay. Alright, thanks so much." And I pretend to hang up. I set my phone down in the passenger seat and tell him that I was going to go now, but that I had hoped that he was going to be okay. That's when I noticed his pocket bulging with something silver peeking out. I knew right then, this man was armed, and I had to get the hell out of there. I smiled and said I was sorry I couldn't help, and quickly rolled up my window and sped off, turning around further down the road and passing him again at 65 to 70 miles an hour on a 45-mile-per-hour road. I started crying hysterically, and I pick up the phone to tell the 911 operator what had just happened. She said, "It's okay. You did the right thing. You played it cool and appeased him. We got the address, and the ambulance is less than 5 minutes away." As she asked me for my name and identifying information, I see and hear sirens further up ahead. Thank God for that 911 operator coaching me through the situation. I still don't know what happened to the man, but I do know that he was clearly intoxicated, dangerous, and fully panicked, which is a scary combination that will make people do things without thinking clearly in an instant. My little girl asked, "Mommy, was that man hurt? I saw a boo-boo on his head." I just said, "Yeah, he's okay. He got a boo-boo. I think he was playing and bumped into a tree. A nurse is going to give him a Band-Aid. I'm glad we could help him." She was satisfied and smiled, continuing to listen to the music and sing when I turned the radio back on. A terrifying and creepy encounter, to say the least. I'm a 19-year-old female French student, so please excuse my English, and this event happened last week. I was heading to my apartment after seeing a friend. I took the tramway at 11:30 p.m. because I didn't feel comfortable walking at night. As soon as I sat, a man who was already sitting nearby came and sat in front of me. I had a very strange feeling about it, so I told my boyfriend by chat. Then I stood up to get out of the tram, but the man quickly got out after me. He was weirdly following me, not walking behind me, but next to me. I was getting very anxious, knowing something was wrong, so I continued to walk to the avenue that I live in. I crossed the road and he didn't, so I thought it was okay. But a few seconds after, he crossed the road too and was walking behind me. Then he passed me and was walking in front of me, so I thought that I was just getting paranoid and that he was just walking his way too. But near my building, he stopped walking in front of me and waited until I caught up to him. He asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I answered, "Yeah, sorry, good evening," trying to be as polite as I can be. He proceeded to leave in front of me, so I was walking slower for him to be far away from me and to make sure he didn't know that I was almost home. I turned into the little pathway heading to the lobby of my building, but I was still anxious about this man, even though he continued to walk. I thought I had put my keys in my pocket, but they were in my bag. I was shaking so much that I tried multiple times to grab them. I managed to get them, and I opened the magnetic door, but thought of closing the door immediately after me in case the man wanted to follow me. The door was closed, but the magnetic system wasn't on yet, so the man was running to it and pushed it violently, with horrific eyes looking at me. The door is made of glass, so I could see through. That's when I knew that I was getting into real trouble, so without even thinking, I screamed as loud as I could, and I think that's honestly what saved my life. Immediately, the man ran to me, pushed me hard on the ground, and started to choke me as hard as he could. I was too stunned because I wasn't prepared for such a violent assault. While he was choking me, I couldn't scream at all, or even breathe. And nobody was coming, so I really thought that I was going to die, looking into his bulging eyes, staring directly into mine with pure hate. I'm a very small person, so I wasn't able to do anything with my arms at all. I think it wasn't that long, but it felt like an eternity, and I lost consciousness for a moment. When I opened my eyes again, he had just ran out, and I saw the caretaker's wife beside me. The caretaker was chasing after the man, but didn't manage to get to him. He came back and called the police that caught the man within 10 minutes, thanks to the description that we had. I really don't know why he did that to me, because when he attacked me, he didn't take anything further or rob me, which he could have easily done. I can't understand that his only goal seemed to be to kill me. I'll never be thankful enough to my hero who came to help me and save my life, because nobody else in the building called the police or even seemed to care. This happened about 7 years ago, and I'm still mentally recovering. I was at a warehouse party that is used as an underground venue. I had a couple of drinks and was chatting with a few people when I see a friend of mine. We'll call him John. John and I have been friends since middle school. I'm in my 30s now, and our friendship only deepened after we graduated high school. We have had many one-on-one hangouts, dinner, drinks at a bar, etc., and nothing's ever been weird or awkward between us. We would discuss the typical topics of family, hobbies, politics, etc., and John has always been a bit of a loner, but maintained a few close relationships, and I always chalked it up to him being a bit shy. Overall, I perceived him as a good person, and one of the few male friends that I could trust. We engaged in conversation, and everything was going completely as usual. Then he randomly mentioned that he was jealous of me. This took me aback, as at the time nothing was particularly great about my life. Low-wage job, no serious significant other, kind of a terrible car, etc. I began questioning him about why he would be jealous of me, and Several times he tried to change the subject. I kept pressing him. He sounded depressed, and I thought that he needed to open up. He goes on to say that he's jealous of the way that I interact with people, how naturally it comes to me, how I always have a positive energy about me, and how I genuinely care about things. I tell him, well, there must be something you care about. He proceeds to tell me that he doesn't care about anything or anyone and just never has. That all of his friendships are based around similar hobbies, but he genuinely doesn't love or care about a single person that he has ever known. I was very disturbed at this point, as I could tell that he was completely sincere. I asked, well, what about Carlos? Carlos is a mutual friend and the person I thought to be John's closest friend. He replied, even Carlos. I kept asking him different questions like, not even your mom or sister? And he would respond, no, I don't care about them. I don't hate them, but I don't love them. Never have. This conversation carries on for a good 30 minutes or so. He describes his thought process about a myriad of things in life since he was a child, basically devoid of feeling and knowing that he was different from others. John and I have taken psychedelics many times, not together, so I asked him, what do you experience when you trip? He replied, visual hallucinations, but mentally all the trips are the same. They're dark. I don't have euphoric love or other blissful feelings that some people describe. I got dark fantasies, man. He goes on to say that he has a proclivity for violence, and that it's the only thing that he thinks about that makes him feel anything at all. And then he tells me that he's killed somebody. At this point, the room is spinning around me. I'm utterly terrified, and had been for a while, and was completely screaming inside in panic. I didn't feel threatened by him, but I could tell that he was being completely sincere. I've known him since we were kids. He was calm. My eyes were darting around the room when they weren't met with his, looking for any sort of exit alibi. He starts in on the details of the murder. He shot a man in the head, a stranger who was unsuspecting. He didn't go into much detail. He was apologizing to me profusely between every detail he did tell, saying that he deeply regrets telling me all of this about himself, that I'm a beautiful person, and he can't believe I'm the one he confessed to. He mentions many times that I'm the only person he had ever told any of this to. He also tells me that he doesn't regret it. He then says that he must take his own life now that he has admitted this to me, because all he wants to do is kill people, particularly strangers. He said that if he doesn't take his own life, that he'll kill again. We discussed therapy and other options, but ultimately he says that he's gonna take his own life, and now I know why. I don't talk him out of it. I don't tell him no. I tell him I'm there for him, but that I think he should do it. Judge me if you want, but it seemed like the only answer in this horrifying moment. This entire conversation had lasted about 2.5 hours. At the end, he swears to me secrecy and tells me that I've been a good friend and gives me his last goodbyes. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, did he go through with it? No, he didn't. I ended up confiding in a few mutual friends, basically stating, stay away from John. I didn't go to the police as John told me I was the only person he had confided in, but one of my friends who I confided in did go to the police. I don't think anything came of it. John reached out to me several months later telling me that he desperately wanted to kill again. The desire was so strong that he wishes that he would just off himself and that would go away. I just blocked him on everything after that. I ran into him at another party about a year later and we exchanged greetings like nothing weird had ever happened between us. But I dread running into him again. Click the join button to become a member today for exclusive content. I'm a 27-year-old female. I'm married to my husband, a 31-year-old man. We have 2 children, Isaac, an 8-year-old from my first marriage, and Tiana, with my now husband, is 5. I'm new to Reddit, so I have no clue if this is even the right subreddit for my situation. I'm very distraught right now because I've been seeing this woman almost everywhere I go, and I have no idea if this is happening by coincidence, and I'm trying to be as calm as I can while writing this. I'm also not great with English, but this whole situation started somewhere around May of 2022, where me and Isaac were at the local park just doing our own thing. My son was just playing with some other child at the monkey bars when I saw this woman approach me. She had red hair, pretty sure it was natural, and her face seemed tear-stained. I became concerned as I thought she was crying. I proceeded to ask her what was wrong, if she was all right, but she kept staring at my son. The more she looked at him, the more she sobbed. Then, all of a sudden, she sprints to him, running, screaming, "Michael." She kept calling him that, and it freaked me out. I mean, she was running to my kid and calling him a different name. My son and the other child got scared, and I approached them before she did as I was faster than her. I then screamed at her to get lost, but she just stood there as I held my son, and she seemed pretty enraged. She then muttered some things, but I couldn't hear her as she had stomped away. The other child's father and I talked for a bit, and he seemed alarmed by what had happened. He predicted that she was probably a grieving mother and that my son looked like the child she lost. I was still disturbed and took my son home. Since then, I have been afraid to take any of my children to any public areas despite my husband's reassurance. Skip to June 2nd, 2022. I get a call from my school stating that a woman, who was a new volunteer for lunch duty, kept mentioning that my son was her quote-unquote Mikey Bear, and that she had been looking for him for years. They told me that another volunteer who had been working with her reported this. I was scared as hell, and I acted immediately by signing my kids out for the day. When I called the school the next day, I was informed she was no longer there, so I became pretty freaked out. Skip to last week, July 13th, 2022. It was Tiana's 5th birthday, and we decided to host it at a park in my in-laws' hometown. Everything went well, although I was paranoid. It was somewhere between 9 p.m. and when we began tidying up, and as I looked at many of the oak trees behind us, I could have sworn that I saw her. I screamed at the top of my lungs and started chasing after her, but she somehow got away. Ever since then, I've not seen her, but I feel like that this might not be the end of it. I'm a 21-year-old female, and my roommate/best friend, also 21, lived in a rental house. I won't say our exact location, but it's in Texas, and her and I are both practicing Wiccans. We do rituals, meditations, and have weekly coven meetings. I can't stress enough how much Wicca is not a bad religion. Witchery is not really how it's depicted in fiction. We don't pray to the devil, we don't sacrifice animals, and we certainly don't harm anybody. Being a pagan in Texas is hard enough. Thankfully, in our area, it really isn't a big deal as we're close to a college town, but as it is to everywhere else, we do have our bad people. So we live close to an older couple. We're not like right next door or anything, but close enough to see them if they're outside. I was doing some meditation in my second-story bedroom. It's about 110 degrees here right now, so I was in a state of half-dress just to combat the heat. Later in the day, the man that lives next door stopped at my car and said that he saw me, quote-unquote, naked and praying to the devil, and that this was a nice community and we weren't welcome if we were going to practice that evil stuff. I told him to get the hell out of my driveway. As I was getting in the car, he said something along the lines of, "You keep playing near the dog's bowl. Don't be surprised when the dog bites you." I just flipped him off and left. I'm not a mean person, but I have low tolerance for ignorance. My roommate, who is a lot more introverted than I am, was confronted by the same guy's son, who is a few years older than us, and said that his mom was feeling scared because their cat had recently died and that she assumed that we were behind it. As two girls that have a cat ourselves, we were upset that anyone would think that we were behind this. He also made mention that his dad had pointed out that he had seen me meditating in my room, but she had very wisely pointed out that he was the one looking through the window, and that he wouldn't have actually been able to see anything unless he made an honest and determined attempt to do so. and this apparently angered him and he left. So we both woke up early this morning to run some errands before the heat got too bad. When we left, we found that all of our plants had been ripped out of the ground and thrown around the yard. Our squirrel feeder and bat house were also damaged. Also, our cat's outside bed had been cut up with what I'm assuming is a knife. The biggest thing that bothered me was that a ceramic triple moon insignia that we have hung up on the side of our house was thrown into the yard and broken. Not only did we feel that our faith was attacked, but also our personal space. We called the police and filed a report. We told them everything that had happened with the neighbors, and they said without more evidence that there was nothing they could do. Shocker. And this has literally hit home for me. This isn't Salem. We're not here to hurt anyone. I've been really into this sub lately, and it's inspired me to share a few of my unnerving stories. This happened ages ago when I was 21. I was a manager for a big box store, but in a town that was an hour drive from me. I lived in a small town and the store was in another small town, both about 12,000 people each. But in order to promote to a manager, I had to transfer, which meant doing this drive daily. I had hoped that it would be temporary because I dreaded driving this every day, especially late at night because of deer. This was also before cell phones were really the norm. I did have one, but it was one of these ancient bag-style phones, and I had just got it a week or two before. With these phones, you had to plug them into your car lighter in order to have them work, and they had a cord attached to a handset. Anyway, one night I was driving home, and it was really late, about 1 a.m. The drive is pretty desolate, with houses sporadically throughout mixed with sections of wooded area. About 20 minutes before my town is a random casino in the middle of BFE. I had just passed this casino and a truck pulled out behind me. I didn't think anything of it, but it was noticeable pretty quickly that they had been drinking because of their erratic driving. Because of this, I figured that I'd just put as much room between us as possible. Also to note, as I was going past them, they had their headlights on, of course, and could have easily seen that I was a young girl by myself. So the truck comes up behind me at a pretty fast rate of speed and goes to pass me. As they are next to me, they swerve a little towards me, and I just think that they are much more drunk than I thought and slowed down so they could easily pass. As soon as they got in front of me, though, they started to slow down. Way down. It got to the point that we were going 20 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone and still slowing down, like they were trying to stop me. Every time they would get to around 5 miles per hour, I would swerve to the opposite lane and give it some gas like it was going to pass, which would then make them temporarily speed up. I could also see a lot better in the truck at this point. It was an extended cab truck with what appeared to be 5 or 6 guys in it. This was during hunting season, so it wasn't out of the norm to see a group of guys acting ridiculous and drunk this time of year. So they were trying to stop me, and I didn't want to necessarily pass given what had just happened, but at a certain point, I had to. So I go and try and pass the truck, but it blocks me from doing so by getting in the middle of both lanes. I try this a couple of times with the same result. Then finally I try to floor it and pass the truck, but it tries to run me off the road. I immediately get back behind him and am freaking out at this point. I had tried calling 911, but there was a huge area with no coverage yet and I couldn't get through. After what seemed like forever, I finally get through to them and they send me someone out immediately. As I'm on the phone with them, I see car lights in my rear view and am filled with panic because I know this car will inevitably try to pass given we are only going about 30 at this point. And sure enough, the car comes up behind us and goes to pass. And sure enough, the truck actually runs them off the road and into the ditch. I'm telling the 911 dispatcher this, and I'm in full-blown panic mode. We're getting close to town now, though, and I can see the first stoplight. I wasn't sure what the truck was going to do because our one lane splits into two and there was a gas station up ahead. And right as we approach the first light, I see an officer come in the opposite direction and starts flashing them over and over while telling the dispatcher that I see the officer. The officer makes a U-turn and gets in between me and the truck. He flicks the lights on them to pull them over, and they pull into a gas station at the main intersection of our town. I follow into the gas station to assist the police in whatever statement they may need and want to make sure these idiots are actually arrested. That didn't end up being a problem because they refused a breathalyzer, so they were taken to the hospital where a blood alcohol level was obtained. I really wanted to know more, but the officer didn't elaborate. I kind of wished that I could have called up and followed up on it. They never called me or anything to do anything in court, so I'm guessing they didn't need me, but it also means that they got away with only getting a DUI. I didn't realize this wasn't okay until way later, much too late to have done anything about it. All I know is the officer said that they were all 3 sheets to the wind. God only knows what their intent was, but I was terrified to find out. And thank God for that bag cell phone. It honestly probably saved my life. I got off of work at 11 p.m. The sad part about this is I volunteered to work this shift. If I had never offered, I would have never experienced this. This particular apartment is on my college campus. My campus is an open campus, which means anyone could enter at any time. As a female, I guess that's kind of unnerving. However, I always carried a pocket knife and pepper spray. I had to park pretty far away from the apartment since most parking spots were filled. I finally found a parking space, but thank God I checked my surroundings before I got out. There was a fairly tall, grimy old man standing about 50 feet away from me. This sent chills down my spine because he stood so still, like a mannequin. I could see his bloodshot eyes. They were wide open. Now, I knew I wasn't getting out of the car, but what the man yelled to me made my heart pound out of my chest. "Come here, pretty girl," he said, with a slight creepy grin on his face. I don't know why I did it, but I shot a bird at him, probably because I had a feeling that he was a pervert or something. I put my car in reverse and backed out of the parking spot, keeping my eyes on the man. My heart pounded even harder when he started speed walking towards me. He was about 10 feet away from my car when I finally put my car in drive and stomped on the gas pedal. I literally drove to the other side of the apartments and panicked. I called my roommate/best friend and told her what had just happened. I asked her to wait for me at the door and stay on the phone with me. I stayed in my car for about 5 minutes to calm myself down. I kept looking around to see if my guy followed me, and he was nowhere to be seen. I didn't want to get out of my car, however I had to get in my apartment somehow. I parked in a spot where my apartment wasn't too far away anymore. I decided to book it towards my room. I had my best friend on FaceTime the entire time I sprinted. I flew down 2 flights of stairs until finally I got about 100 feet away from my door. I saw my best friend waving at me. A feeling of relief came over me, and only for a few seconds though. Now I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Get Out, but just picture a grown man sprinting towards you. That's what happened. The grimy old man hauled it towards me, but this time, he looked livid. It was like a scene straight out of a horror movie. I don't know how he found me. I don't know what his problem was, but I could have broke the national record for the 40-meter dash. I darted towards my door. Thankfully, I reached my apartment just in time, and right when my best friend and I slammed the door, the man's fingers got caught in the crack. He screamed and tried to shove the door open, but my best friend and I surprisingly shut him out. This happened over a year ago. My best friend and I have never spoke on this, ever, and I never saw that man again. And I never volunteered to work another night shift. And I never worked another night shift period. And I never, ever shot a bird at anyone else again. I'm a 27-year-old female who went backpacking alone over the recent long weekend, which was 10 out of 10 beautiful. The second night, I camped at a beautiful high-elevation lake, which could also be accessed by a short 1-mile trail, so there were a few other campers and several people who were just day hiking and fishing. It was late afternoon, and I was sitting around my camp reading when a guy in his mid-20s walked by carrying a fishing pole and a small cooler. I didn't think much of it, but 5 to 10 minutes later, he doubled back and came and said hi. I said hi and went back to reading, but then, without warning, he then sat down on a stump next to me. I was completely taken aback at this invasion of my space. He started asking me questions that were really just statements, but in a creepy, amused tone like, "So, you just reading?" And then looked behind me and noticed my tent and said, "Ah, you staying the night here alone, huh?" I didn't say anything in response to this in particular, but it's obvious that I am. It's hard to explain, but his vibe was just really off. I was so uncomfortable that I couldn't even really form words or tell him that I was trying to be alone to get him to leave. I was honestly paralyzed. His eyes were so dead and dark and just drilling into me. I just responded with like, "Uh-huh," or "yup," or something, and just tried to pretend that I was still reading. Without warning, he pulls out and cracks a beer and lights a cigarette and just starts blowing it at me. At this point, I'm so uncomfortable and just not responding. Soon another hiker wandered by and he strikes up a conversation with him, and I took the opportunity to grab my water filter and bladder and pretended to need to get water. I went to the shore and filtered some water super slowly and saw him walk away to go sit with the new guy, which made me super relieved, except that he kept looking in my direction. I came back eventually and got inside my tent, and for about 20 minutes everything was fine. I had the rain fly pulled back and was watching the sunset and loosely organizing my things when he popped out from behind my tent and stood maybe 1 foot from my door looking down at me. He didn't say anything, but just started laughing really creepily and fakely again. I asked what, and his response was, "This is just, really funny." I felt literally sick in my stomach and finally responded with something like, "I'm taking a nap now, so have a good night." He laughed again, but luckily left. Later, I saw him wandering around the camp with no real purpose, still looking in my direction often. I had no service, but I wrote down his last name, at least what was written on his cooler, and where he said he was from while talking to the other hiker in my notes app just in case, and slept with my pocket knife close. I debated leaving camp that night, but ended up staying and just leaving super early in the morning in case he came back. Normally while backpacking, I think the worst thing that could happen is that I might run into a bear or sprain an ankle, and maybe this seemed not that bad as you're reading it, but this truly was the most unsettling experience I've ever had in the backcountry. I'm sure I'll be back out soon, but hopefully somewhere far away from this dude. Now, a little context. I'm a 19-year-old female and moved back into my mother's house late last year. I have a neighbor who's 50-ish or 60-ish year old male who I've caught watching me almost every day for the past few months now, maybe since January or February. The way our houses are laid out is a little confusing. My backyard ends on the side of his house and yard, so the back of my house is pointed to the side of his. My room's windows faces the back on the ground level, so I have a direct view of the side of his property. I hope that makes sense. What he'll do is stand outside when he smokes, and the whole time his body will be facing my direction. When I first started noticing it, I shrugged it off as him just looking at the sky or mountains behind my house, or maybe he was zoning out. But after a while, I noticed that he didn't try to look in any other direction when I'm in my room. Soon, it was just about every day I could count on seeing him outside looking in my window or yard. I was getting sick of it. I started by hiding when I could see him, then shutting the blinds on him and opening them up after he left, and staring back at him and even flipping him off. He knew I had noticed. Now he would scurry away behind the corner of his house when I protested. At this point, he knows I've seen him multiple times and don't like him. Now, yesterday was different. I was taking the screen out of my window so that my cats could come in and out as they please. One has abandonment issues and won't go outside without someone close. So now seeing me through my window was even easier. My younger brother was in the back working on our garden, and I was leaning out the window chatting with him. I looked up and saw the guy, half hidden behind his house, facing right toward me. My annoyance and anger had reached a breaking point. I yelled at him across both properties to stop staring, and he scurried away behind his little corner. My brother and I continued our conversation as it seemed he got the hint. I was wrong. I kept an eye out for him and that corner. I saw him again, this time just the top of his head and his eyes as he concealed his body behind his house and leaned as far as he could. My blood ran cold. This guy, who I don't even know is like 3 times my age, is so desperate just to look at me that he can't stop even after being yelled at. I yelled again, and he hid again, not saying a single word. I was trying to wrap up the conversation between me and my brother so I could shut my window and hide. Once again, I see him, just his head and eyes staring. I screamed this time, then slammed my window, and he cowered off. I wasn't planning on making this post until I saw him doing it again today. My window was shut and he ran off before I could yell again. I felt sick to my stomach. He won't get the hint. I don't know what to do. I like keeping my blinds open during the day since I keep cacti in my room that need light. Not to mention the lights in my room don't work, so I have to use sunlight anyway. I shouldn't have to change my routine because of some creep, but I don't think I can report him to the police because he's staying on his property and I don't know if I can legally record him if he's in his yard. I want to knock on his door and tell his wife, but my mom advised me against that. I don't think me giving him a stern talk will do anything other than fuel whatever fantasies he might have of me, and it could be dangerous too. This situation is starting to affect my mental health. I'll wake up in the middle of the night convinced someone is right outside looking at me. I can't even change my clothes in my own room anymore because I feel like he's already caught a peek. I don't think ignoring him is an option that I can continue. Do you guys think that there's even a way I can help my situation? This happened just last week. I'm currently on maternity leave and my partner is back at work, so it's just me, baby, and dog most of the time. So last Thursday, there's a loud knock on the door, loud enough for me to hear over the TV despite being in the back room and having the doors closed. I get up and answer the door with the baby in my arms, thinking it might be a guy selling milk, the window cleaner, or even a postman. When I open the door, there's a guy standing there who initially says, "Hey," and just starts repeating, "I'm begging for my life. I'm begging for my life," over and over again. The thing is, he's not screaming it or really even being erratic. It only started after I opened the door and he said, "Hey." So looking back, I really don't think that he was begging for his life, as he said. All the time he's saying this, he's just staring straight through me. Not at me, through me. I shut the door after he said this 3 times because clearly he didn't actually want anything. I spent the next 10 minutes frozen in the living room before going upstairs and checking out the windows, both front and back. I spent the remainder of the afternoon with the curtains closed just in case he popped into my back garden and decided he wanted in. I posted on my community Facebook pages and he approached someone else on my street and actually dropped to his knees. We think he was just high as a kite, but really creeped me out, especially being home alone with a 3-week-old. So this happened in 2011, so the exact dialogue may have escaped my memory a bit, but the situation is something I'll never forget. Also, AIM was still pretty active during this time, and so was video chatting. Think Tiny Chat, and this is important for later. I was on an online dating site. I won't say which because I'll be dragged mercilessly in the comments, and was talking to this guy. I was 31 at the time, and he was 28. We talked for about 6 weeks before I gave him my phone number, and we took it offline to calling and texting for another couple of weeks. 2 months after our initial chat, we were texting and he told me that he was out having a few beers at a bar near my house. He asked what I was doing and asked if I wanted to come out, but I had a very long day at work and didn't feel like going to a bar. I'm also not a big drinker. I invited him over to my place. I know, after he finished at the bar, and he accepted. I figured that I would be okay since I do keep firearms for protection and know how to defend myself if needed. I also have a webcam. I took a shower so I wouldn't smell like a water buffalo on a hot day. The air went out at work. Put on some makeup and got dressed to wait. He then called and said that he was outside of my house. I clicked record on my computer webcam program and turned off my monitor and went to let him in. It's around 10 p.m. He comes in and we go back to my bedroom because my living room was being remodeled. We're sitting on the bed chatting for about an hour, talking about everything under the sun. The conversation flowed. He was very handsome and so easy to be comfortable with. We got on the subject of firearms and I showed him mine. About 15 minutes later, he asked for some water, so I go to the kitchen and got him a bottle. When he came back, he said that he got a phone call and had to leave. After he left, I looked on my nightstand where I put the firearm down after showing him and noticed that it was gone. I looked everywhere for it, thinking I had put it down somewhere. No, not there. I then played back the recording from my webcam program and sure enough, it shows him grabbing it and putting it in his hoodie. I was terrified at that point. He knew where I lived, he had my firearm, and he left his phone on my bed. Right then his phone rings and I answer it. Come to find out, he's married. His wife was calling him wondering where he was. I told her everything, including the fact that he stole my firearm and I had video evidence and was calling the police on him. Next thing I know, he's banging on my door. My firearm is in his hand, asking me for his phone. And the conversation went like this. I need my phone. Give me my phone. Not opening the door, but yelling through the window. Take the clip out of my FA, empty the chamber, throw the clip into the bushes, the one in the chamber across the road, and put it on the ground. No, give me my phone. I'm on the phone with your wife at the moment, and I have you on video stealing from me. I put his wife on speaker. She let out a whole bunch of expletives. And him, with a shocked Pikachu face, he runs and gets in his car and then comes back. I threw your gun in the ditch. At this point, I make him empty his pockets, take his pants off, take his hoodie off, and show me that he doesn't have my FA on him. All the while, his wife is on the phone. I go outside and get in his car, in the driver's seat, and tell him to take me to where he threw my FA. He proceeds to tell me that I don't know how hard it is for him, being a felon, not being allowed to own a firearm ever because of a mistake he made. And that mistake? It was domestic violence involving a firearm. We get up the road. He tells me the firearm is there in the ditch. Then I realize the situation I'm in. I can get out of the car and go get it, leaving him to do whatever to me he chooses. He was 6'4", over 220 pounds, and me, 5'3", 135 at the time. But I could make him go get it, taking a chance of him seriously hurting me. I took that chance, since I was on his phone with his wife and my phone with 911. He retrieves my firearm, brings it back to the car, and I drive back to my house and wait for the police. I get out of the car and he gets in the driver's seat. I'm still on the phone with the police. I walk around the back of his car to get his license plate number and he puts his car in reverse, hits me, and takes off. They found him later that evening. He still had the clip and the one in the chamber in his pocket, so now he's enjoying time in prison. Today on my morning commute, something caught my eye in the brush beside the road. I immediately ID'd it as a deer, either an adolescent or even a baby. I took my foot off the brake just in case it decided to dart out into the road. As my car slowed, I realized something was very wrong. The deer was frozen in place, cheeks stained with streaks of dried blood from its wide-open eyes. Flies were swarming around, and I realized it was dead. When I got to work, I Googled deer diseases and couldn't find anything that would cause one to die standing up. And unless it happened post-mortem, I have no explanation for the tears of blood. I'm sure trauma could be the cause of this, but I had a clear view of 3/4 of its body and saw no apparent wounds or disfigurements. The more I think about this, the more certain I become that someone found the poor thing dead, hopefully rather than being the direct cause of its demise, and decided to pose it right there on the side of the road. Why anyone would ever decide to do this is beyond me. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember to be careful who you shoot birds at.